Welcome back, my quiver of capitalists, to AP Economics, presented by Cobranomics, your all-American history teacher, gold standard of economics, le champion of classical liberalism, and your sensei of supply side, Professor G here. And today we are going to combine our economic indicators to take a look at the business cycle and the cycle the economy goes through and how to tell what stage of the economic cycle and business cycle we are in. So, just here, let's take a look at our graph. We have our y-axis, which is our general growth rate, and then time. We kind of have two competing curves here. We have a cyclical curve, measuring the natural ups and downs of an economy, and then we have our idealistic, where we want to be. Ideally, we would love to be at this steady 4% growth rate. However, prices, exogenous shocks are always moving the economy away from where we would be. But ideally, we would always love to be at the steady, natural 4% growth, slowly growing 4% quarter over quarter, year over year, over time. However, the reality is this boom and bust roller coaster. So let's take a look at how we use our economic indicators to see where we are in the cycle of boom and bust. So first we have our expansionary stage, and in our expansion, real GDP is increasing at a decent 3 to 4% steady growth rate. Because real GDP is increasing, because there's an increase in spending on newly produced goods and services, we can infer two things. We can infer, one, an increase in production means more labor is needed to produce those items, so unemployment is decreasing. And because unemployment is decreasing and there's more spending in the economy, this means there will be some inflationary pressure. You will see the inflation rate slowly increase. Remember, the demand pull inflation is not necessarily bad inflation. That means there's an increase in spending in an economy. So in an expansionary phase, you will see that there will be some upward pressure on the price level as there's more spending and as there's less people and less unemployed. That means that those people are spending money as well. Then we have the peak, and at the peak, real GDP is at its highest, unemployment is at its lowest, it is closest to it is at the natural rate of 4%, maybe it is a little bit under 4%, like it was in 2019. And inflation, though, because there is so much spending in the economy, inflation is at its highest. And because inflation is at its highest, this is where you have the natural economic bust. These high price, we're kind of producing beyond what we can sustain as an economy. The quantity demanded is outpacing the ability and willingness to supply, really the ability to supply. So these pressures on prices are going to start creating cost push inflation. People are going to start demanding higher wages as the price level increases. This demand in higher wages is going to cause a decrease in production, and the economy is going to start to contract. Again, so this is naturally what would a natural boom to a natural bust. Of course, unfortunately, as we see, there are other exogenous shocks, outside shocks, that take us from booms to busts and back to booms again. But this is just naturally without the exogenous or outside forces. And as the economy starts to contract, so now we have real GDP first slows down, and then in the contraction, it becomes negative. So that means that there is a decrease, there's negative spending, it is contracting, the economy is shrinking. Unemployment, because there's negative spending, unemployment is increasing as people are not spending money on newly produced goods and services. That means that businesses don't need the labor to produce those goods and services, and that leads to increased unemployment. So now unemployment is beyond the natural 4%, and we start seeing that cyclical unemployment, 5%, 6%, 7%. as GDP becomes more and more negative. And because there is less spending in the economy, inflationary pressures actually decrease. We see a decrease in inflation and a decrease in the CPI and price level as there is less ability and willingness to spend money. Prices are going to actually start coming down. The worst part of the contraction is called the trough, meaning the bottom, and if it is a historic trough, we call this a depression. Like in the Great Depression, you had 25% unemployment. 1 out of every 4 Americans was statistically unemployed, let alone all of the people who had part-time jobs who were considered employed, but were definitely underemployed, but yet statistically employed. So the trough is the deepest part of the recession, and remember, 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth equals a definition of recession. So the trough is the worst part of the recession. Here, GDP is at its most negative. In the Great Recession in 2008-2009, GDP was like negative 9%. Unemployment is also at its worst, at its highest. Like also, Great Recession, GDP was 12%. And sorry, unemployment was 12%. GDP was negative 9%. So you see that as the GDP really negatively decreased, unemployment skyrocketed, unfortunately. And however, inflation is very low, and inflationary pressures are very low because there is so little spending in the economy that is driving prices down. As people have a less ability and less willingness to spend, price level and CPI is going to decrease. But after the, unfortunately, all of these time periods, we see time here, all of these time periods are unknown. These could be quick peaks, these could be extended peaks, or these could be prolonged contractions and prolonged recessions, or quick recessions, like unfortunately the Great Depression was 1939 to 1941, that was 12 years. The 1920 to 1921 recession was 18 months. So recessions could be quick. The 2008-2009 recession was about a little over a full year. And then you have, so different periods have different, there's no definitive length of time for each period. And with the Depression, with prices at its lowest, you will start having a natural recovery. Well, as with prices are at its lowest, input costs are also, this is going to drive input costs down, and it's also going to, if people are unemployed, people will be willing to work for less. This is going to drive wages down. This is going to be the big driving down of input costs. High unemployment equals people are willing to work for less. This drives input costs down. This increases a business's ability and willingness to produce. So this causes a natural recovery. We're going to take a look at the Keynesian criticism of this theory, but in theory, this is how a natural recovery is explained on the AP test. Like I said, we are going to look at the Keynesian theory and what he would recommend instead of this natural recovery. So the natural recovery would be people are unemployed. Because people are unemployed, they're willing to work for less, and as they're willing to work for less, this lowers input costs for businesses, which allows them to start increasing their production again. And now we are entering the recovery phase to the expansion phase, and that's why it's a cycle, because we cycle back over here, and now we have real GDP is increasing again. As real GDP increases again, unemployment goes down, and now you have where inflation is kind of a positive thing, where the increased inflation rate is signaling to the economy that, hey, people are spending again. And these are our booms and busts. And like I said, these are booms and busts can occur naturally. They occur most naturally through the pressures of price on wages, either the pressure of price decreasing purchasing power, leading to a demand for higher wages, and then inversely, wages as a form of of recovery, wages go low, decreases input costs, businesses now can start producing again. In the coming units, we are going to take a look at John Maynard Keynes, the father of our course, his criticism of this and why he would recommend that government get involved and use its powers of fiscal policy to hasten our recoveries and so that we're not in a prolonged trough and recession. But this is naturally the booms and busts of an economy. Also very important to note that industry-wise, durable goods, you think about TVs, televisions, phones, any durable goods, refrigerators, washing machines, these are durable goods and very similar to like the elastic checklist. These are things that are, could be postponed. These are things that take up a large portion of income. In many cases, like a new phone or new television or new laptop is a luxury. So durable goods are most affected by this period of boom and bust. In the peak, in the expansion and peak, people have the income, and they have the ability and willingness, and they are buying durable goods. Versus in a contraction and trough, this is where people tend to put off those purchases. So durable goods, in terms of durable goods is like stocks, these are great, they're great, you're going to catch the wave when you buy them in the expansion and the peak, but during the contraction and trough, they are going to notice a decrease in sales. However, like the Cobra, this is the time to strike in terms of the stock market. Stocks are taking a pounding, and this is what John D. Rockefeller did in the 1872 depression. This is when during that depression, he used his capital reserves and he bought up the competition in the Cleveland Massacre, when he bought up all of his rivals as they were struggling, and he didn't. So you have the bull market, you have the bear market, and you have the Cobra, who is always ready to strike when it comes. And that's why, in terms of investing, as a side note, you always want to slowly invest your money and have some money put aside for, unfortunately, if this does occur, this is not a time to run for the hills like the bear, but to strike like the Cobra and actually improve your portfolio during a stock market downturn. Also during this time period, in both these time periods, to quote Warren Buffett, to put your money where your mouth is. While durable goods kind of go with the boom and the bust, perishable goods and service industries kind of are steady throughout. Utilities, service industry like utilities, they're always going to consistently earn money, never be super impressive, but they're always going to have a steady flow of money. Heat always has to be paid. Electricity always has to be paid, boom or a bust. And to quote Warren Buffett, putting your money where your mouth is, people always have to have food. That's why Warren Buffett merged Kraft and Heinz into one company, and because people are always going to have to buy perishable items, no matter in booms or in busts. So not only is the business cycle important for AP Economics, but there is a lot you could take away as hopefully future investors and being a part and having ownership of our capitalist society. Thank you for watching. Remember, whether it is your money, your mind, or your body, invest hard, invest often, and no feelings. Money never sleeps. We'll see you next time.